Hey guys, okay, so this is our actual lesson for today. This is where we're going to go through and talk about the appropriate vocabulary words and clarify words that I was using, like variable and categorical and quantitative. So the title of our notes is Types of Data, and we're just going to start filling in these blanks. So statistics is the science of data. Some people say data. Doesn't matter to me. I think I say both, but most of the time I think I say data. Data are trying to tell us a story. So every data set that we take is trying to tell us a story. To hear what data are saying, we need to help them speak by organizing, displaying, summarizing, and asking questions. So it is our job to tell the story for each data set. And we do that by organizing the data and then using that data to put in a graph. Most of the time when we say displaying, summarizing, and asking questions, it all starts with organizing and then graphing. The information from the graphs can allow us to summarize the data and can sometimes lead us to ask questions and answer those questions. When we do notes like this, hang on, I need to yell at Murphy. When we are doing drop-in notes like this, these paragraphs usually come from the textbook. So just know that a lot of the information that I am giving you is from an approved textbook or from the AP board. So you can feel confident about the information that you're getting. So data tell a story, and it's our job to tell that story by organizing it and graphing it. That's called data analysis. That's called data analysis. Any set of data contains information about some group of individuals and the characteristics that we measure on each individual are called variables. So those are our first two vocab words. We have individuals and we have variables. Now, individuals are the information, the group of things or people that we're taking information on, and the thing that we measure is called the variable. So individuals are the people or the thing that we're taking data from or on, and the things that we're asking them about or measuring are called the variables. So these two boxes are the definitions for those. So individuals are the objects described by a set of data. Individuals may be people, animals, or things. Individuals may be people, animals, or things. And this little arrow here is indicating that for each individual, a variable is any of its characteristics. Okay, so variables can be either categorical or quantitative. So these are the words that I was using in the last video on the grouping the different graphs. So Notice that your arrows are trying to indicate to you how to organize this information. So we have individuals that we're taking information from. The information that we are gathering on the individuals are called variables. And from there, there's two different types of variables you can have. So a categorical variable places an individual into one of several groups or categories. And notice that the descriptions are all words. Categorical variables are described using words. So we have gender, zip code, handedness, etc. So zip code's an interesting one. We'll come back to that in just a moment. Handedness means like, are you left-handed or are you right-handed? If you're taking information that requires a yes or no answer, that is also categorical. Like, did you bring your grouping cards back today? The options are yes or no, so that would be a categorical variable. You would be the individual. So if we were taking data on how many of you brought back the cards that I gave you last time, you would be the individual, and I would be looking at a categorical variable, which is whether or not you brought back those cards. So yes or no. The other type of variable is a quantitative variable. So these take on numerical values for which it makes sense to find an average. And when we say average, we're specifically talking about taking all of the numbers and dividing it by the number of observations and finding an average value. So what that makes sense for is your GPA. Your GPA is the average of all of your grades. Your CPA is the average of all your citizenship scores. Your age can be averaged. I could take all of your ages in this class and say, okay, on average, if you're in this class, you're about 16 years old. So let's jump back to this zip code example here. So zip codes are numbers. My zip code is 84128. Magna is 84044. So it is one example where a variable is described by a number, but it's categorical. And the reason why is because it doesn't make sense to find an average zip code. That does not make sense. Like, I would never take all of the zip codes, all of your zip codes, add them up, average them, and say the average zip code in this class is 84328. Like, that, there is no zip code designated to that. So, or associated with that number, I should say. So, in general, categorical variables are variables that are described using words. And in general, quantitative variables are variables that are described using numbers. But there are a couple exceptions like zip code. And in that case, you have to ask yourself, would it make sense to find an average zip code? And the answer is no. Would it make sense to find an average color of car in the parking lot? No, you can't average colors. So the biggest distinguishing factor is for a quantitative variable, you're looking for numbers, but then beyond that, you're looking to see if it makes sense to average that information. Then our next section says the proper method for analysis, or the proper method of analysis for a variable, depends on whether it is a categorical or quantitative variable. The type of data determines what kind or kinds of graphs and which numerical summaries are appropriate. Okay, so we discussed what's going on in this bottom part. Sorry, I'm trying to zoom out, but my button's like not cooperating. We already talked about this bottom part with our graphing cards, and the graphs aren't exactly the same. These 8 graphs are not the exact same graphs that were on your cards, but they're similar. So these 4 graphs are all categorical, and you only make these graphs if you have determined that you have a categorical variable. So that's what they're saying. The type of data determines what kind of graphs you can make. If it's categorical, you can only make these kinds of graphs. If it's quantitative, you can only make these types of graphs. So you cannot make a pie chart if your data is quantitative. The next part says it also determines which numerical summaries you can do. So you can't find a numerical summary is something like the average. You cannot find the average, you cannot find the average color of a car. You cannot find the average type of pet everybody in this class owns. So numerical summaries also depend on your data, the type of data that you have. So this is the heart of the matter for this entire lesson. This isn't necessarily the most important part about chapter 1, but it is one of the most important things to understand for this entire course, especially as we get further on down the line, like chapter 6, 7, 8. It is very important that as we move through this school year and as we move through the different lessons, that you always keep in mind what type of data you're looking at. And I think in years past, I haven't hit this as hard as I should. And so that's why I'm making a big deal of it this year and spending one lesson on just this. It is extremely important that when we are given a data set, that we all can look at that data set and say, okay, this is categorical data or this is quantitative data. So this entire first page is trying to give you as many examples as you might need to distinguish the difference between the two and describe the difference between the two. Okay, so we're moving on to the next page now. And this is our first example of what the practice problems for this lesson look like. So Jake is a car buff who wants to find out more about the vehicles that students at his school drive. He gets permission to go to the student parking lot and record some data. Later, he does some research about each model of car on the internet. And finally, Jake makes a spreadsheet that includes each car's model, year, color, number of cylinders, gas mileage, weight, and whether or not it has a navigation system. So the first thing that we need to decide are who are the individuals in Jake's study. And whenever we describe an individual, we have to be as specific as we can possibly be. So when we determine who are the individuals in Jake's study, we want to ask ourselves, what are we taking information on, or what are we taking information from? So we're not asking anybody questions, so it's not a person. There's no animals in this problem, so it's not an animal. So our only other option is that it has to be a thing. And the thing that we are taking information on is cars. Now, you don't just want to say cars because that's not specific enough for the information the problem gives you. What cars are we taking information on? Well, cars at Jake's school. Where are these cars? In the school parking lot. What parking lot? The student parking lot. So depending on the information they give you, you want to make sure that you are as specific as possible when you describe the individuals in a study or in a data set. So for this particular example, the individuals are the cars in the student parking lot. And you need all of that for full credit. The cars is not enough, and you wouldn't just write the student parking lot. So you have to say the cars and where they're at because the problem gives you that information. So the cars in the student parking lot. What variables did Jake measure and identify each as categorical or quantitative? So we're going to go up to the problem and I'm going to highlight for you the part of this prompt that tells you all of the variables that Jake looked at. And when you go through and do problems like this, the most important part is that you do your best to include every variable. When I go through and grade these, typically the thing that I mark wrong the most is that you just miss one. Like you're going through and maybe you're going super fast, and so you miss one of the variables. So we want to make sure that we highlight every single variable that is listed in this sentence. So it says later he does some research about each model, but then down here in my highlighted part, it says that again. He makes a spreadsheet that includes each car's model. So that's our first one. So the model is like the brand. Is it a Nissan? Is it a Jeep? Is it a Mitsubishi? Is it a GMC, a Ford? Is it a Chevy? That is the model. Those were all words that I just described to you. Or is the model is the type of car. So the make is GMC, Ford, Chevy, Jeep. The model is what kind of Jeep, what kind of Nissan, what kind of Ford. Is that true? Either way, it's described by a word. So we're going to write a comma, and then I'm just going to shorten it up and say C instead of categorical because it says identify each as categorical or quantitative. So I'm going to say model is categorical. Okay, next up is year. So we're talking 1999, 2000, 2006, 2007. So it is a number. Let's verify though, would it make sense to average it? So could I say I went outside and averaged the year for each car there, and on average you guys drive a 1994 car. I do believe that makes sense. So this one is this one is quantitative. I do think that it makes sense to average the year. And then I'm going to go up here and just mark that off because I want to make sure that I get all of these. So model year, next up is color. And I've used this example a lot to describe categorical. So model year color is categorical. You would not average color. Cross it out. Number of cylinders. So I'm going to say hashtag of cylinders. Hopefully this one's an easy one because they're telling you it's the number. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know how many is the maximum amount, but I don't know if it's even high as 4. This one's quantitative. Sorry, my thing told me that I maxed out my time for recording, so I'm going to try one more time. The next one up here after you cross out number of cylinders is gas mileage. Gas mileage is how many miles you can get per gallon. My Jeep gets 30. I do not know what is going on with my recorder today, but I am having so many problems. So I apologize for all the cuts and the edits in this video. I know it's horrible. The last one we did was number of cylinders. It was quantitative. Make sure that you mark it off up here just to keep track. And then the next one we have is gas mileage. So gas mileage is how many miles per gallon your car gets. My Jeep gets 30 miles per gallon. Man's Jeep only gets like 18. I had a Honda Fit once that got 40. Those are all numbers. So gas mileage is a quantitative variable, and all those numbers that I gave you were average numbers. On average, my car gets 30 miles per gallon. So that means that it would make sense to average your miles per gallon. So it's definitely quantitative. Okay, I'm going to cross that one out. Weight. That one's listed up here already. That is quantitative. We describe our weights using a number. Mark that out. And whether or not it has a navigation system. So when we're determining if it has a navigation system, either it does or it doesn't. It's a yes or a no. So that would be a categorical variable. I'm just writing navigation. Yes or no is a word, so that's going to be categorical. So we described our individuals and we tried to be as specific as possible. And then we went through and listed out all of the variables. So this was all of the different types of information that we wanted to know about the cars. Those different types of information are different variables. We went through and listed them as categorical or quantitative. Now we're almost done with this video. The last thing that I want to do is go through and see if we can look at a couple of our cards and see if we can identify the individuals and the variables. So I'm pulling up the dot plot first. The dot plot is hours spent on homework per week. So animals don't do homework, things don't do homework, only people do homework. So in this case, our individual is students. Only students do homework, and we don't have any information beyond that, so that's as specific as we can get. Students, our individual, the thing that we took data from, is students. Our variable is the title of the graph, hours spent on homework. So looking at the options that we have up here, it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is definitely quantitative data. And we already know that because we split it out as a quantitative graph. And I have on my note sheet that you can only do a dot plot if it's quantitative data. Maybe let's look at a categorical one. So, want to try to find one that's maybe not too complicated. Okay, so in the segmented bar graph, we need to identify the individuals. So who or what did we take data from? And in this case, it is different age groups. So I'm going to say people. Our individuals that we took data from are people. And then maybe I'm going to draw an arrow up so that we can get more specific about what types of people it was. So in this case, our individuals were 10 to 12-year-olds, 13 to 15-year-olds, 16 to 18-year-olds. So maybe we should not draw an arrow and we should say 10 to 18-year-olds. Because remember, we want to be as specific as possible. And in this particular set of data, we do have more information besides that they're people. They're at least 10 years old and at most 18 years old. So what variable are we looking at? Well, the variable that we're looking at, or the thing that we're interested in, is whether or not they have a cell phone. So the variable is has a cell phone or does not have a cell phone. You could think about that as yes or no, which means that it would have to be a categorical variable. One, because we know that segmented bar graphs are categorical variables. You can only make a segmented bar graph if you have a categorical variable. And two, we know it's categorical because of this, the words. It's described using a word. So what you're going to do now is go through and finish or do the check for understanding. So you should feel pretty good about 2. You should feel pretty good about at least B on number 3. And then number 8, I think that you probably feel okay about. A and C here, you're going to have to try to do without me, but I think you'll do just fine. If you notice, these numbers are not in order. It goes 2, 3, and 8. That's because these problems come from your textbook. So if you went into your textbook and you looked at the first section, you would find that the practice problems from that section match up to 2, 3, and 8. So for future reference, all the problems that you do are typically from the textbook that is on my counter in our classroom. So you're going to finish this, and then once you're completely finished, you're going to go in and watch the solutions video for these problems. It is important for you to watch those solutions so that you can check your work. If the solutions video is not up by the time you finish this packet, then start memorizing what the names of these graphs are. Because remember, I'm going to quiz you on what these different types of graphs are called. Not next time. It's going to be at least 2 class periods before you take that quiz. But if the solutions video isn't up, start memorizing these now. That's a good thing that you can use class time on. So do your check for understanding, then get in and watch the solutions video. If the solutions video is not up, start memorizing these parts. Okay. Good luck. Just kidding. I don't think you need luck.